Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Ruchim Habayim. Welcome, a special welcome to all of our guests who are with us this morning. What a pleasure it was to listen to Zoe and to see her accomplishment. A great preacher once said, before I say a few words, I'd like to say a few words. And I want to do that because this isn't my sermon, but this is just welling up inside of me. I have found it painful to be here this morning because of the great uncertainty of the world around us, because of the great pain that we have seen in the Middle East, and how much we feel for all of that. And now we've been in a situation, our people have been in a war for nearly a year. And we've been praying about it, and we've been expressing our hopes for it. And it continues. And so I want to just address one thing. And that does have to do with this extraordinary covert action that took place this past week, which for many, the immediate response was, wow, Israel still has it. It's like, this is an Entebbe moment. This was like the response to the terror of the Olympics in Munich. This is like the Six-Day War, something just extraordinary. But yet, within my heart is the following, and I'm sure many of you share it, that Israel's a very small nation, and it has been under attack from terrorists almost from its very beginning, and that the threat of terrorism is so real and so dangerous to the country, and there is a need to combat the terror and the terrorism as any country in the world would do. And yet we also know that at the end of the day, the conflict is larger, and the conflict will not be won militarily. I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, violence breeds violence. We all know that. That's a reality that history has taught us. And so here's my hope and my prayer. My hope and my prayer is that the leaders see or have a strategy that will lead to an end game. And there will be thoughts about the day after and what will be done the day after. Because here's also something that I know and that you all know. And that is that Israel is so vastly outnumbered, and it doesn't have the resources to be able to be at war forever. This week I heard from a friend a story of a good friend of his. And the story goes like this. The guy was in Gaza for nearly 4 months, and then came home to his wife who had just delivered a baby, and then received notice that he had to go to the Lebanon border. And he said to his friend, I don't know how long I can sustain this. I have a business, I have a wife, I have a child. So we pray for the end of this speedily and soon, and we pray for the strength of Israel, and we pray for peace for all people. Those are my words before my words. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, words that we spoke or read much earlier in the Torah. V'asuli mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell therein. Sometimes we desperately need a sanctuary as a place where we can go to escape, where we can go to feel comfort, where we can be together with ourselves, each other, and our God. So I want to make this sanctuary feel like a sanctuary. I'm sure you know that I am not the Rabbi who tells Hasidic stories. If you pay attention to what I've done over the last 31 years here and 42 years in my rabbinate, you'll know that I've told 5 Hasidic stories in 42 years. Not much of an average. But lately I've begun to rethink this whole area of storytelling and culture, and I've been reading more about it. And I've grown to learn that we know each other best from the stories that we tell each other. The stories teach us so much. The stories that you tell reveal so much about your identity and your past. And stories can also take us to faraway places. Our stories reveal our hearts and our passions. And I know that as I get older, my stories reveal my most memorable lessons. I found a new friend last year or 2 years ago, a scholar in residence here by the name of Dr. Ariel Berger, Rabbi Dr. Ariel Berger, and I've been in touch with him regularly since he was a scholar in residence here. I know that many of you here remember his visit. He is a teacher, he is a rabbi, he is a PhD. He's also a witness, and he's a storyteller. One of the things that he's a witness to is the work and stories of one of the great witnesses of the Shoah, Elie Wiesel. And because of the profound impact of the Shoah on Ariel and the literature that emerged from it, and because of the powerful influence that Elie Wiesel had on his life, he studied at Boston University. He was Wiesel's TA for 8 years. He wrote a beautiful book entitled Witness. Ariel Berger devotes himself now to peacemaking and to the peacemakers of the world and future peacemakers. He lives 6 months a year in Sharon, Massachusetts, and 6 months a year in Jerusalem. He's gathered people from all over the world, people of great spirit, and people who are or will one day become leaders in different nations, places as far away as Sri Lanka. People who are willing to learn from each other, and people who hear each other's stories, the stories of their families and ancestors, the stories of their communities. These people come from all over the world, and they're part of Ariel's Witness Institute. Ariel has expertise in all different types of literature, both Jewish and secular. He's a psychologist, he's deeply spiritual, and now he teaches primarily through the stories he tells. Here there's been another guest over the years. His name is Hanan Schlesinger. Hanan is a Jew from America who grew up in a very, very secular home on Long Island, but became very observant. He made Aliyah, and his passions for the land brought him to the religious settler movement. And one day, literally one day, he had an experience that forced him to review his life, his place, his understanding, and he decided to make changes. He realized that he had neighbors who were not Jewish, neighbors who did not consider themselves Israeli. They were Christian and Muslim and had Palestinian ethnic identities. And Hanan, this very, very religious settler, also realized that there was more of the story that had to be understood. And so he realized that he could be part of a problem that continues to evoke violence, or he could become part of a solution, and he decided to do that. He and a Palestinian neighbor began a program called Roots. They realized they had to enter into a relationship and to expand it. And they learned that for people to know each other, they had to hear each other's stories. In many ways, Roots is a storytelling organization. These people had to see each other, and through many different types of programs, they've created something else. They've created something beautiful. They have a summer camp for the two communities that sit side by side. They help each other with civil defense, guarding neighborhoods, They help each other with their agriculture. Of course, the project right now is a bit on hold, but the people who are in leadership on both sides believe one day they will renew this project. One such project is called Through a Lens. And this year we're going to meet an extraordinary Swiss photographer who put it together. Her name is Saskia Keeley. And we're also going to welcome Ariel back. So as I said, it's often said that we are part of the stories we tell. And being willing and able to hear other stories is so important. I know that the members of this congregation who I have gotten to know best, I've gotten to know you through the stories you've told me about your lives, where you come from, your communities and your families. Each one of us has a story that's unique to us. The Parsha this week imposes upon the people to recite their stories, as I mentioned to Zoe. It's the second part of the strategy in entering the land. And that history would teach them a lot about their identity. So, I learned a Hasidic story this week, and I'd like to share it with you. And it's a story that has nothing to do with the social, cultural, political, strategic issues of the world. It's a story that's about being in a sanctuary and can teach us so much. And by virtue of telling the story, I reveal something about a value that I hold very dear as a person and as a rabbi. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev was a great Hasidic leader in the 18th century in Eastern Europe. It is well documented that his great love of God was so incredible that he was a Rebbe who lived in a constant state of ecstasy. At his Shabbos table, he recited prayers to God. No one ever knew when that would happen, but when that happened, his spirit would go wild. He was quite unpredictable. He might take the wine in his Kiddush cup and throw it around at the table. He might get on top of the table and start dancing and singing. And he would sing for an hour, for 2 hours, and his Hasidim would sing with him. Well, the story goes that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak longed to share a Shabbos meal with a different rabbi, Reb Baruch of Medjabaj, another Hasidic master, a highly respected Hasidic master. There was, however, one difficulty. Although they lived in neighboring towns, they lived their Jewish lives very differently. At Reb Baruch's table, everything was done in a very dignified way. It was like a yeke, as we say. There was a royalty to him. And there was no wildness at his table at all. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak knew that he probably would never get to share Shabbos with Reb Baruch. But his emissaries went to Reb Baruch's emissaries and they struck a deal. They said Reb Levi Yitzchak could come to Reb Baruch's Shabbos table, but he would have to sit there in silence. And he wouldn't say anything at all except Amen to the end of a bracha. So when the appointed time arrived, much to everyone's surprise, Reb Levi Yitzchak was at Reb Baruch's table and everything was going really smoothly. That is, until Reb Baruch's server asked Reb Levi Yitzchak whether he preferred his gefilte fish sweet or sour. And Reb Levi Yitzchak yells out, "Fish? Do I like fish? I only love God." And he shouted it again and again, "I only love God." And he was overcome with ecstasy and he tossed his fish plate high into the air. And to everyone's horror, the plate landed squarely on Reb Baruch's tallis and stained it. Tensions filled the air as everyone awaited the very, very highly controlled Reb Baruch to respond. Reb Baruch then announces very calmly, see these stains? These stains are holy because they were caused by a Jew who really loves God. And afterwards, Reb Baruch refused to have the stains washed out because they represented a great enthusiasm that he yearned for. And that treasured stained talus was passed down from Reb Baruch to his son and his grandsons and throughout the generations. Reb Levi Yitzchak's behavior, as exceptional as it appeared to be, actually has a deep source in our tradition. Throughout Jewish literature, the sages emphasized the need to lead one's life, especially one's spiritual life, with some passion. We weren't to sit quietly and watch a service take place. A famous book written by a famous rabbi in Poland, Reb Kalman Shapiro, is called To Heal the Soul. And he declared that every human being is filled with passion. But there are two questions. One is, can you access your passion? And the other is, in what direction do we place our passion? A tremendous lesson is found in this week's Torah portion, Ki Tavo. This lengthy passage that stretched over 53 verses describing the horrific things that will befall the Jewish people if they act improperly. Terrible punishments, diseases, anxiety, depression, starvation, all of that would befall them. Remarkably, though, the Torah emphasizes that this would come out for the following reason. Quote, you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and goodness of your heart. It doesn't say because you weren't scrupulous in the observance of mitzvot, of the commandments. It says because you didn't serve God with joy and goodness in your heart. It's saying that you need to feel. You need to express those feelings, the feelings of goodness and joy. It's part of being human. And so it raises this question, what does it mean to serve God? In our culture, a place like this, I think it means to act lovingly to each other, to be respectful to each other, to have empathy, to show kindness and generosity, and to do no harm. In some Jewish circles, to serve God consists of observing the mitzvot scrupulously. But the story hit me because I think that doing good, being good and serving God has this other component. And it's such a difficult component to find in days like the days that we are experiencing. And that is to find joy. To find joy. That's the challenge for us. And I think we're particularly challenged for the following reasons. One has to do with the materialism of our society, the deep obsession with things and ownership. And the second is the excruciating, profound impact of the internet, the virtual world, the constant bombardment of bad news. And both of those things represses our emotional expression. And the result is that we've lost our ability to express passion, to cry out with sadness, or to shout out with joy. And we need that. We need that desperately because it's essential to being a human being. Doing our religious obligations, we've been taught, may fulfill requirements, but unless we access the feeling and the emotion, it's all going to be dry and boring. The psalmist taught us the following, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. We should serve God with joy, and we should. And we should try to live life with joy, not avoiding obligation, not avoiding reality, but there are moments where we must bring joy. And whether it's with others or with our spiritual desires, we need as much heart and spirit and feeling as we can possibly give. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.